Lead me to some soul today. Oh, teach me, Lord, just what to say. Friends of mine are lost in sin and cannot find their way.
Welcome, everyone, to episode number 84 of a series that we've been calling Leading Others to Christ. We appreciate you being on here with us this morning. And those of you that have seen these episodes, you know that what we've tried to do is we've tried to focus on evangelism. And we want to, as the Bible says in Hebrews, we want to try to stir each other up to love and good works, but especially in the area of leading our family and friends to Christ. And my name is Dan Barker. I currently one of the evangelists at the Vestavia Church of Christ in Vestavia Hills, Alabama, which is just south of Birmingham. We've been here, for those of you that may or may not have known that, we've been here for a year now, and it's been an exciting year. Those of you that know me, and I'm trying to do this very quickly because we've got an exciting podcast today. But those of you that know me, you know I'm passionate about evangelism. I have been ever since I obeyed the gospel in Owensboro, Kentucky, when I was 21 years old. I came out of a denomination, and I've always been striving to teach others, to use some Bible phrases, to sow the seed, to fish for men and women, if you will, to make disciples, to persuade men and women, and to teach others to teach. And that's a big part of what I do is try to help teach others how to teach others, if you will. And remembering what Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men, and obviously, and women, who will be able to teach others also. And then later in that chapter, he said, and talking to Timothy, to be useful for the master, prepared for every good work. So at one time I was calling this my COVID project because we started this back during that, but came up with this idea. Let's try to identify Christians, men and women, those fellow workers who are doing this, who are involved in evangelism, who are reaching and leading others to Christ. And once we've identified them, to interview them, we want to learn about them. We want to find out where they are, how they're doing their work, how are they setting up studies, and everything that we can about them. And so that we can learn, so that we can improve how we lead others to Christ. And I'll be honest with you, it's been fascinating. Probably 80% of the people that we've interviewed, I've never met in person. So I've made a lot of new friends, and that's been exciting. But we're really excited today. We have two with us today. We have Phil Robertson from Tampa, Florida, and then we have Ben Hall from Brooklyn, New York. That's two distances there, and that's kind of
covering the coast.
Yeah, what coast? Yeah. So welcome, guys.
Thanks, Travis.
Yeah, it's great for you to squeeze us in your busy day today. Again, to go ahead and get started, those of you that have been listening to these, you know that I like to start out with, because some of you, I know a lot of you know both of these guys, some of you don't. And so let's do the little elevator pitch or the short bio. And Phil, we'll start with you. Just go back to the beginning. Where were you born? How old were you when you obeyed the gospel? Who taught you? Just kind of bring us up to speed.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for the opportunity to be on your show, and I appreciate you a ton. And I just want to say at the beginning, I'm thankful for you, and you've been a good inspiration and help to my son, who's actually worshiping with y'all in Birmingham. So thank you so very much. I had the blessed privilege to grow up in Lubbock, Texas. And my family and the Bowman family have always been dear friends. And Dee Bowman and my dad worked in radio together. And so I had those ties back in Lubbock. So that's where I grew up. It was a great place to grow up. And due to the wonderful teaching of Dee and my parents, I had great, amazing, godly parents who taught the Lord to all three of us. My brother and sister and myself, that we were inspired to follow the Lord, and due to my parents and their inspiration and their godly teaching, that's how I became a Christian. And then due to the influence with Dee and Ed Harrell and others, I had the opportunity to go to Florida College, and then that desire grew even more, so that I left there not with just a desire to go out and work, but I wanted to be an evangelist in the kingdom of God.
Well, we're so thankful that sometimes I'll do this. We won't do it today, but I'll go, why are you doing what you're doing? Of all the things that you could have done, why are you doing this? Why are you preaching? Why are you teaching? And but anyway, all right, your turn, Ben.
Well, I grew up not far from where you are. Actually, I grew up in North Alabama in Lacey Spring, and similar story. My parents loved the Lord. My dad became a Christian a couple of years before he met my mom. And then they met in a church in, I think it was in Athens, I'm pretty sure, at a gospel meeting or something. And then whenever it was after that, they were married. And then me and my siblings came along after that. And they grew up going to Bible studies and gospel meetings and all that kind of stuff, running around there in that area with so many people who love the Lord and help each other love the Lord. So that was it for me growing up. And then I went to school in Birmingham, and then started preaching after I got out of college in Atlanta. And my wife and I are now in Brooklyn, New York, with our 4 kids.
How long have you been in Brooklyn?
It'll be 6 years in December.
6 years in December.
Yeah.
My son-in-law is from Brooklyn. Ted Butler is.
Okay, yeah, I know Ted.
Yeah,
I know
okay,
his mom, Marilyn, and Jeff were really. I knew him before we moved there, but they were really gracious to us. We would have Bible studies in their home and stuff. Caleb and I would go. Caleb's we're close with them.
Yes, yeah. So that's what, and obviously we all recognize this. Ones that are in this family of being able to sit down like this, and it doesn't take long in a conversation, and we'll know people right away. And that's what I love about this, and it's just so exciting. But just a quick story on Ted's parents. I just thought of this because I went to the World's Fair in 1964. It's when I graduated from high school, and it was in New York. And went to the World's Fair there. Had a fella, took a group of us up there, but Ted's mom and dad, being from Brooklyn, they went to the World's Fair, and a Church of Christ had a booth. And they walked by and picked, and they handed them a tract. I don't know if you've heard this story, but that's how they heard about the Lord's church, and that's how all that started. So you just never know, right? You never know.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it is, and it is so exciting. And we back to what you were talking about with Gray. What a good kid.
Thank you.
Obviously, he takes after his mom. But anyway,
that's very true. That is very true.
All right. Let's. All right, Brooklyn to Tampa. All right, I just think it's. I said that a second ago. I want to do this. Why are you doing this? Let's start with you, Ben. And I'm sure when you were growing up, I remember when I was a kid. I was Danny when I grew up in Kentucky, but they'd say, Danny, what do you want to be when you grow up? And from the 4th grade on, I said I wanted to be a basketball coach because I had a basketball coach in the 4th grade that I just loved and ended up being a huge influence on me. And so, Ben, when did you decide that you wanted to do what you're doing, and what motivated you to go that way?
Well, it's probably at least 2 layers I'm thinking of. One layer, as far as thinking of it as what job I wanted to do, I had no idea. Even going through college, it was hard for me to figure out. I mean, I had a lot of challenge of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I never really thought about being a preacher, quote unquote, you know what I mean?
Yes.
In so many words. But, I think what it was, my parents, my grandparents, at least on my mom's side, we're very evangelistic because, hey, if we believe this thing for real, then when we have a gospel meeting, we need to go to the trailer parks and, house to house, whatever, and invite people. And whenever somebody comes and knocks on our door to have a Bible study, I remember when I was in middle school, I would go with my dad. He had a multi-year Bible study with someone from the Watchtower religion that I would go with him to, and he went to the guys' things that he'd invite him to, and it was trying to convince each other. But that was because, hey, we're this is what we're supposed to do if we're followers of Jesus. I appreciated there was one brother. There was a camp I went to for young men that emphasized Bible study and service in the kingdom There's one brother there who he would say your preaching is a function of your discipleship. And he was really discouraging thinking of it as a career path, but just saying, hey, this is, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is one of the parts of it. And so it needs to be who we are. So I've kind of accidentally stumbled into doing this as my vocation, I guess you could say. But I guess that's why I do this, is because if I really believe in this thing in the gospel, then we kind of have to. It's not an optional thing. It's not special ops. It's not a career path. It's just what we're supposed to do. So
good. And I agree with you. I should have said amen to that last part. All right, your turn, Phil.
Well, I was blessed to just grow up in a home where my parents loved the Lord and they didn't believe in just being those who go and warm a pew. My dad would go around and preach, and I would actually go with him. Places like Morton, Texas, Spur, Texas, we'd hop in the car and my dad would go preach for these small country churches. And then our home was always a home of hospitality. And so it wasn't a question where you were going to be during gospel meetings, much less regular church services. This is who we are. This is what we do. And my parents were just wonderful servants in the kingdom. And so that stuck. And when I got to Florida College, especially, and I got surrounded by a lot of fine young men and wonderful teachers, I began to realize, hey, there's a lot more to life in service to the kingdom than just going out there making money and going to church. And so it inspired me to think maybe I should be preaching some. And so my life goal was to be a self-supporting preacher. I thought that's what I'll do. I'll go and be a businessman, and eventually became a television journalist. And I'll just go wherever I go with a TV job and find a church and fill in. And that's what it became. But Cheryl and I quickly learned that the role of an evangelist in evangelist's life was more consuming than we realized, in a good way. And it got to the point where it was hard to do both. And what was crazy was everywhere I moved with a television job, there was always a church in desperate need of help. And when we got there, we just didn't want to be a talking head and a preacher, didn't want to be a one-trick pony. There's souls that need to be saved. And so we really got into developing our home and our lives as stewards of the kingdom in that regard. And so everywhere we moved, there were just opportunities to touch souls. And so it just kept growing and kept growing and kept growing wherever we were. And so it's just become a part of our lives, and we love it. And what's interesting is we make connections, Ben and I do, through people that we both have had the opportunity to touch in that regard. And it's just inspiring to see what the Holy Spirit does in our lives when we really commit ourselves to be soul winners.
Oh, so good. And I, with both of you, my brain spinning of thinking a path I'd like to go down here. One thing too with, and I've said this before, and I mean, this is transparent, but any ideas that you guys have after we're done of how we could improve this, let me know. We're trying to make it as good as we can. And the first thing I know, one of you is going to say, get a younger guy to do it, get somebody else. Anyway, but we are, one of the things, and I'm going to take something you just touched on there just briefly. One of the things, and this is not going to be negative at all, but one of the things that's come out of doing these interviews is some things that are very, very serious and very eye-opening. For example, close to 3 conservative congregations are closing their door a month, and there's a preacher shortage. And one of the reasons, there's multiple reasons this is going on, and it's not being negative, it's just the reality and why this work of evangelism is so important. There are congregations out there and don't know why, and speculate, and some people, have ideas, but the local group never learned how to reach out in the community and teach others. And if it was done at one time, then the guy that was there, he left. And anyway, so there's such a need for Ben, but what you're doing there, that teaching the kids about the kids, they're still kids to me, but the students there about evangelism and how important it is. And that's one thing that we're really working on here at Vestavia is just trying to ground that in. And like you said, Ben, it's not just the preacher's job or the elder's job. All of us are supposed to be out here sharing this good news. And the more people that we can get to be convinced of that, they won't be able to keep it inside, and they're going to want to learn how, and they're going to want to talk to you guys and anybody else that they can about how to do this. And so I just get really fired up about it. And I've shared this before. I'm trying to think who it was. Dempsey Collins, I think, had shared this with me. There was an article in the Owensboro Messenger and Enquirer. This was in 1960. So, and then what was fascinating that when he sent the article to me, it was in 1960. It was on April the 30th, which is my birthday. I thought, this is so weird. But the title of the article it was the Associated Press article, "The Church of Christ is the fastest growing church in America," in 1960. Can you imagine, guys? Can you imagine seeing that a headline? And people that read newspapers today, but imagine seeing that as a headline. And it's like, to me, it triggers, well, what happened between 1960 and today? And we could talk about that for a long time, but there's a lot of stuff that's gone down, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is not very pretty. I'll say it that way. So what are your thoughts on that? So what's happened?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to 1960 very much, but I do like that passage in 2 Timothy 2 that says the Lord knows those who are his. And so I don't know that, but the statistics aren't nothing, but I don't know they're everything. But I will say one thing that I'll tell you, I'm even kind of hesitant usually about doing, I enjoy them, but doing weekends like this where we talk about evangelism, because it can kind of make it seem like here's this really, really unique, special topic that's sort of its own thing off to the side. And what I'm trying to do better about when I'm talking about this is talking about it as part of the broader whole of what we are. So in Luke 10, when Jesus sends out the 70 or the 72, the passage right before that, which isn't Luke 9, it was just the paragraph before that, is one of Jesus' hardest calls to discipleship. And the next thing is he sends out those who answer the call to discipleship to go make more disciples. And so I need to realize that the reason why we're not evangelistic, or the reason why we're not bringing in more people, is we're not committed disciples. In 1 Peter 2, where Peter talks about you guys need to, you're a royal priesthood, people for God's own possession, that you would proclaim the excellencies, one of the best summations of evangelism. Well, the paragraph right before that is, coming to him as a living stone, you also as living stones are being built up into a holy temple, a holy priesthood to offer sacrifice. So holiness is the issue. There's not holiness among us. We consider ourselves ultimately to be just like everybody else. So of course we're not convincing anybody, because we don't think we need to convince anybody, and they don't see anything that's worth being convinced about, because we're not really living holy lives. And I'm picking at different things here, but if I really love my neighbor as myself, then how could I not be talking to them or trying to figure out how to talk to them about the gospel? So when I think about things like that, it's not that we've lost some tactical advantages or, something's off in that regard. And I think, you could look at some similar kinds of statistics in even the broadest strokes of what's called Christianity in the Western world in general. This is an issue because we've been, I think the way Jesus described it, choked out by the cares of this world and by the deceitfulness of riches. And so we're not really committed, sold out to the cost of discipleship. We're not really as holy as we ought to be. We're not really loving as we ought to be. If I look myself in the mirror and say, I'm not influencing people with the gospel, those I think are some of the kinds of fundamental issues. And hopefully, and I think, actually, I'm encouraged. There's a lot of people that are doing that stuff.
No, there is.
And I know you know that. And then you said that at the top. But I think if I look myself in the mirror and say, I'm not very evangelistic, then I need to actually say, am I taking up my cross daily to follow Jesus? Am I living as a member of God's holy nation? Do I really love my neighbor as myself the way the Lord does? So that's kind of the way I see some of that stuff.
We did not talk about this beforehand. He just stole all my thunder.
Sorry,
and no, that's all.
Read your notes, so I did.
That's great. I'll just build on exactly what Ben
That's great.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
And taking that and really putting it in practice.
Yeah.
And I didn't grow up in the 60s, but I did grow up in the 70s and 80s. And I'll have to be honest, evangelism, as we're doing it today, was not emphasized enough as being a part of what a godly life is, in my opinion. And maybe that's just where I was. But here's what I'm seeing even now, Dan. Here's what I'm seeing even now. And it's really personal to me because it's my children. My children, when they left home and got off to get jobs and had moved to cities and had visited churches, it's very common for them to say, Dad, I went to this place. First of all, nobody even talked to me. They knew I was a visitor and there was no follow-up, no visitor card. And then after they've been to places a few times, I get, Dad, I was there and I was giving out visitor cards to visitors and I'm a visitor. And then it's something that I'm just like, how does this happen? How does this happen? So if I can just double down on what Ben said, let's take it to those who are to be leaders in the church and to be shepherding souls. Do you know who your visitors are every Sunday? Could you tell me? Do you know that list? Are you working on that list? Because part of being, to me, an evangelist is doing the work of an evangelist. And that's exactly what Paul tells Timothy. And you're not a one-trick pony who just gets up and preaches. That's really, I don't know about for Ben, but that's 10% of my life as a preacher.
Right.
Most of my role I see as a preacher is getting with people, following up with people, organizing our evangelism team to go and to do that work and to become a part of people's lives, that it just consumes you. And so your worship, if you will, in the Lord's kingdom is not just something you do on Sunday. It's who you are throughout the week, and it's a part of your life. And I would challenge all those who are seeking to be evangelists in the kingdom to understand this is part of being holy. This is literally part of being holy. It's not just not cussing and not doing all the things we typically put in the holiness category, but it's becoming a worker in the kingdom in that regard. And I will say, the opportunities are out there. There are churches growing. Yeah, you're right. There are some closing their doors, but there's others who are growing. And because they are purpose focused in this work is why they're growing. It's not just by accident, or they're in the right place, or they're in Brooklyn and people are looking there, or they're in Florida and, people just drop in there.
Or then you got some hotshot preacher that people are coming for. It's usually not that.
Well, not at all. It's just, this is purpose filled, if you would, life service in the kingdom that consumes people of the congregation, but especially those who are leading, the preachers and the shepherds.
Well, both of you, so many good things there. And I've had, I don't know if either one of you, if you get a chance, go back and look at the list of the ones that we've interviewed. You'll know a lot of them. Either one of you have a chance to do that by any chance?
Probably I have. Not. I've listened to it.
No, sorry, I'm jumping in cold.
No, that's okay. But and we've had some that have said off camera, if you will, said, well, maybe we could do one of these where we could have, could we have like a meeting? Could we have, like get several, 8 or 9 or 10 guys together and share some ideas? But there's all kinds of things that possibly that we could do. And of course, I'm 77. How old are you, Phil?
55.
Oh man, just a baby. Just a kid. And Ben?
I'm 35.
30. Okay. 35, 55.
And we've got it tiered here, don't we?
Look at this. Yeah. That's crazy. But no, I just, we first time, quick story. First time we moved to, whenever I played college basketball and had a chance to get my master's degree at University of Southwest Louisiana and go down there. Nobody in Owensboro knew anything about the Church of Christ. And I'd been a Christian for like a year. And so there were 2 there. So we can, okay, what are we going to do? We had our son, he was a baby. So we went to this congregation and went in there, and like what you just said, it triggered the thought. Nobody said a word. So when we're leaving the building, I told my wife, I said, well, this isn't the one. We're not going to come here. Well, we lived in an apartment there on campus, And it was like Tuesday or something after that Sunday. Somebody knocked at the door, and I go to the door, and it's a lady and her daughter. And they had, I don't know if it was a cookie or something that they had brought. And she had our visitor's card. And she said, well, we're at church there, and wanted to come by and thank you for coming. And she said, did anybody tell you what happened Sunday? And I said, no, nobody told us anything, because nobody even spoke to us. And she went, oh, I'm so sorry. But she said, our preacher had a heart attack. He got there before Bible study, and he had a heart attack, and the whole congregation was just in a panic. Oh. And so anyway, and she just was begging us, oh, please come back. This is where you need to be. Anyway, so we did, and it was, and that's where. But isn't that funny? I mean, just the things. Yeah, God bless her for doing that. And so what? Look, so a woman could take her daughter out and follow up with a visitor. Is that permissible? Of course, just the little things like that people can do if they're willing to do it. That ended up being the first place I preached a sermon, and the first place that actually baptized somebody was there in Lafayette, Louisiana. But I don't know. The stories like this, I think, are just, people need to hear them. They need to hear the ones that did not grow up in the church, if you will, like me, and who introduced you, and how did that happen, and how did all that come together? And we've heard some incredible stories. But I think so much of it is we just need to keep encouraging each other of what this work is all about, and try to keep, like I said earlier, try to keep each other, the ones that will identify themselves and kind of raise their hands and say, hey, I'm willing to do this, to really try to help keep them on fire, by maybe it's a card or a phone call or whatever, just to encourage them. If they're there in the congregation, there's a lot of ways you can do that. But even if they're someplace else, and I think a lot of there's been a lot of comments with us even trying to do this, of trying to encourage somebody that's someplace, and maybe they're struggling a little bit, and maybe they were a little discouraged or had a bad week or whatever, and it kind of lifted their spirits to even talk like this some. Let's do this real quick. I call it a conversion story. I'm going to put both of you on the spot. Think about, and I'll see who wants to go first, but think about somebody that you've studied with, and that ended up obeying the gospel, and how you met them, maybe something unique about that conversion story. You're smiling, Phil. I'll let you go first.
Go ahead. I've been starting.
Man, there's so many great stories, but I'm going to do one that's going to actually tie in with Ben here. When Cheryl and I were living in Melbourne, and I was working for the television station there, and I ended up preaching full time as well. My wife developed a relationship with a neighbor across the street whose name was Veronica Ruggiero, and kids about the same age. And so they struck up a friendship and were just hanging out. And then eventually the conversation would turn to religion, and Ralph and Veronica were Catholic. And so that led to conversations. And then they actually came and visited our assembly. And so we had a friendship that just grew out of just getting to know one another. Well,
Ralph's a big, burly Italian guy. Like, just give a little.
Yeah, you got to know Ralph. If you've ever seen The Sopranos, that's Ralph.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he is an Italian. Hey, Ralph here, and
huge hands.
Wow. He's a union worker in construction, and that's what he actually did before they moved down to Florida. So they just happened to be trying to escape New York. They end up in Melbourne. We end up in Melbourne. And so we become friends, and quite a contrast just in our family life history, religion, the whole shebang. But man, we became good friends, and we were starting to study together and talk together. Well, it was about that time that Ralph got a job back in Jersey, and they were going to move away. And Cheryl and I are just, oh man, we were just getting so close. And now they're moving back to New Jersey. But the last conversation we really had before they moved back was, okay, where's a church? Where's a church that we could attend? Well, we found one, and it was 30 miles from their home. It was going to be about a 45-minute drive. And I'm like, oh man, this is just not going to work. Well, they visited, and the preacher there in Washington, New Jersey, was an older gentleman by the name of James Finney, just a man of God. And he's in his 80s. He immediately latches on to Ralph and Veronica when they visited the first time, and they started studying in their home, and they just picked up right where we left off. It was a couple of months later, Veronica's back down in Melbourne to just wrap up some business there. She decided she wanted to become a Christian, be immersed into Christ. So I had the privilege of doing that. And it was a couple of weeks later, Ralph was baptized by Brother Finney. I remember Brother Finney calling me saying, "Hey, Phil, just got to let you know, Ralph was just baptized and I'm calling to say thank you." And I'm like, "Thank you? You're saying thank you to me?" I'm saying thank you to you. You're amazing. And it was amazing to see how the Lord worked in those relationships. And now here's Ralph preaching today. Right. Ralph and Veronica are just wonderful servants in the kingdom. Their kids are Christians. And now what's fun for us is our kids became friends with their kids through relationships, it all going to FC together. And now their daughter's down here now. And Ben knows the Ruggieros very well because his wife grew up in that Washington congregation. Wow. And so we know them, and it's just amazing to see God work in that way, and all the lives that have been touched because of Ralph and Veronica. And it all started with my wife Cheryl just saying, "Hey, there's a neighbor, let me go talk to her." And they developed a relationship because everybody was new to Melbourne at the same time, had kids the same age, and just became friends.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I get just so excited. I really do. It's not an act at all, but just seeing you, and it's been with everybody, when they tell their story, it's like they sit up straighter. Their energy, their hands, if they weren't reactive before, the energy gets going, and they're remembering and recalling all that, and that's why this is so exciting. But whenever I moved here to Vestavia, I preach on Sunday night of the third Sunday night, and so I told them something I'd done before. We started this back in Lexington, but Invite Sunday, and other people have done something like that. So it's like a theme. I used to call it a year-long gospel meeting, but the whole idea is to try to help train and motivate people to invite their family and friend neighbors to come and hear a lesson, And so this year I'm doing what if. All right. It is so many things you can do with that, but watch this. What if your wife had never said, "Let's go talk to that neighbor"? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and then what if whenever they moved, the people there had not followed up with them, and the what ifs just go, but I see the providence of God in stories like that for sure. And but we just never, and then it triggered the idea of the sowing and reaping, but I might sow like you did. Like they were thanking you. You sowed the seed. You and your wife sowed the seed, and the other one, you know what I'm saying? They
were watering it. Brother Finney was watering it.
Yeah. And it's incredible. And it makes the Bible come to life when you're reading those accounts and those parables and those illustrations, and you go, "Oh, wow. That's what Jesus was talking about." That's okay. Real quick, I got a thing from Matt. We're supposed to, and you guys I know you got to leave. So can you do a quick conversion story, Ben?
We've got a brother who was baptized a couple of months back. He's in it's either late 70s, early 80s, Vietnam veteran, has a lot of fallout from that. He has brain cancer. He had, I think it was a cousin whose friend had invited her to a Bible study that you mentioned Roger Polanco was doing. And he found out about it, and he said, "Well, I need to study the Bible because I'm having all these problems." And he had bounced around a lot of different religions. He'd been seeking God really at least ever since he got out of the military, if not before that. So he ends up saying, "Well, I want to get in on that Bible study." So he has a Bible study with Roger, a couple conversations. Turns out really he had already been doing a lot of study, and he really wanted to be a Christian. He wanted to be baptized. So then Roger called me. The first time I met Billy was at our house where we had set up the little pop-up portable baptistry in the backyard to get it ready for him. This was probably February, maybe early March. And our only option was to do an outdoor situation.
Wow.
So we were heating up water in kettles and boiling it on the stove and then dumping it in the thing and all this kind of deal. And he was in our home. We talked a little bit. Caleb read some passages with him, and then he was baptized. I love that one because it just shows like God's moving. And there's that passage, I think it's 2 Chronicles 16, maybe 9-ish, where it talks about the Lord's eyes are going to and fro all throughout the earth, seeking those who are seeking after him. And I think I'm butchering that a little bit, but the idea being God's looking for people. And I think that's a really encouraging thought, that it's not, I mean, we need to be out here doing our part to look, but God's been looking for people long before we ever got involved in their lives. These people have been seeking God long before we ever got involved in their lives. And we need to do our part to help them, to help direct them to where they need to go. But it's a really encouraging thought to see how God moves in all those ways. So
be a seeker of seekers.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Billy bringing his wife, who, by the way, was very resistant and pretty suspicious of all this. But because he had a recent recurrence of his issues related to the brain cancer, she wouldn't let him go out of the house by himself. He's like, well, I'm going to church. So she finally came. He's been trying, and he would tell everybody, this is how he introduced. He's like, this is my wife. He said, I finally got her here. And I was like, we're glad you're here. We have not been trying to do this to you. But, it's amazing. And it's a cool thing. And who knows what will happen from there in his family and all that.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. I can see both of you there. Just how, isn't it amazing though, of the energy that develops just in talking, if it's on the phone or a computer or just in a room of the ones that are doing this work. They're anxious to tell the stories. And if I hear, it's like so many things about the checkout gal at the grocery store, or the server at a restaurant, or the new area that we moved in. So many people here. It seems like everybody I've met is, they're either a nurse or they're in the medical world, or there's so many people here like that. And but just from different countries, and there's just so many opportunities here where we are, and it's so exciting. And the same thing I know both where you are as well. Hey, we're going to have to stop, and I can't believe it. So don't you think we need to do this again? We need to have a follow-up somehow. Okay.
Well, I'd be happy to. And here's what I'd love to share before we take off is the reason Ben's here.
Yes.
Because the students on campus asked to have a weekend focused on evangelism and how to be stronger soul winners for Jesus. So I want to leave very positively. Our younger generation, especially the students here, they want to do this. They see this as important. And that's why we've invited Ben down to help share some thoughts, to help these kids be better personal workers in the kingdom. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is we need to grasp and understand there's a lot of ways that we can try to be growing closer to God. Maybe I can spend time in Bible study or prayer and have a secluded weekend where I really feel spiritual, and that's great. But if you really want to feel spiritual, if you really want to grow closer to God, get out there and do the work. Right. Feel the sweat that comes with being the good Samaritan. Feel the wonderful burden of carrying somebody else's challenges and trying to help them through that. Carry this beautiful opportunity of the gospel to folks and feel the aggravation, but also the exhilaration of being a worker in the kingdom. That'll draw you closer to God and strengthen your faith just as much as spending some time in Bible study. In fact, it's not either or, it's a both and. And I'm just thrilled that Ben's here to help our students do just that. And they're craving that. That's what they want.
No, the combination there is that's so exciting. I wish I was there. I'd sneak in. I'd pretend to be a student. I'd come to this session. But listen, I know we've got to go. Thank you guys. And there's more, but we just don't have time. But if you would share with your friends about the podcast and encourage them to take a look at it. And we've got a lot of things that we'll be reaching back out to both of you too about some ideas and things that we're working on of different ways that we can reach others that are like-minded and keep each other encouraged in this. So both of you, Ben, great to meet you, and look forward to meeting you.
Thanks.
Look forward to meeting you someday in person, Lord willing. And Phil, hope to see you again soon. And thanks, guys, so much. And now don't go away, but this is over with right now. So thank you so much.
All right, God bless.
Melt my heart and fill my life. Give me one soul today. Give me one soul.